Welcome to Pause for Peace with me, Pastor Jule. And thank you for putting up with a couple of weeks of some re-releases. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're hopefully back on track, and so glad that you have found us for today. I actually, just a few days ago, returned from being away for continuing education. And it is like surreal to me that it was like not that long ago that I actually was on the roof of the church of the St. Mary's in Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer, which is in southern France. It's kind of like on the western side a little bit of southern France, not deeply west, but sort of, west of Marseille at least. And it was a wonderful experience. My second time being there, and second time being on that roof, like overlooking the Mediterranean, this beautiful little town that's in this unique area of southern France called the Camargue. And this is the area of the flamingos. This is the area of those beautiful pink salt marshes. This is the area of bullfighting in southern France, which actually is done very differently than Spanish bullfighting. This bullfighting in the Camargue is actually done, you could say, sustainably. It is not with killing of the bull. It's actually a way for the animal and the bullfighter to actually kind of recognize the strength and wonder of one another. But no animals are killed in the process. This is also the land of these gorgeous white horses that have these ancient roots tied with the goddess worship that had taken place in this area centuries and centuries ago. Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer is the location, at least the claim in the Provence tradition, is that this is the location where Mary Magdalene and the companions landed on what then was the shores of Gaul, not yet the country, the nation of France. But this is where they landed and found refuge in many ways in this land on to which they were welcome. It is understood, at least by the Romana culture, the gypsy culture of southern France, that this beautiful, like, queen-like figure called for us today Saint Sarah welcomed the companions onto the shore. And she is the patron saint of the gypsies. And I learned on this go-round from my tour leader, my pilgrimage leader that I was with for the majority of this trip. I learned that there's historical evidence that shows that there was a migration of people from Egypt through Malta and then into like this whole southern region of Europe, which was the northern side of the Mediterranean. And these were people who kind of moved about, and they became what we know now as the gypsies. And it's so fascinating to be in this place because there's definitely a very different feel in the Camargue than there is in the other places I've stayed in southern France, Marseille, in Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer, and the other place I stayed was in Saint-Maximin-le-Saint-Baume, and now even further southeast I stayed a couple weeks ago in a beautiful monastery, French Orthodox monastery, Saint Michel de Var, and this was just a glorious setting. I'm going to talk more about that in our next Pause for Peace, but today I want to take us back to this wonderful sanctuary that anybody can walk into right there in the heart of Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer. And this is a place where Saint Sarah's crypt is, like under the sanctuary, but this is also a place that is really dedicated not just to Mary Magdalene, but even more so to the companions. It's called the companions who arrive on the shores of southern France with Mary the Magdalene. These are the companions that stay in this place, which there was so much interest for me in like, what do these companions do when they stay in this part of southern France? And the companions that are really named and lifted up and celebrated annually in beautiful pilgrimages for them, the companions that are really lifted up are Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe. And if you're watching this video cast, you can see images of them. In fact, I have a gorgeous image of the two of them on this beautiful boat that has been crafted. These are statues of Mary Salome and Saint Mary Jacobe. And this is a beautiful like blue boat with these glorious women that have this gorgeous like golden crown. I believe it's supposed to look like a halo, but it also kind of looks like a crown. And Mary Salome, if you look really closely, Mary Salome's clothes is just a smidge different than Mary Jacobe. They both have like this green dress with gold flowers. I believe they're actually rose flowers, and like a gold band and gold collar. Mary Salome has a robe kind of draped over that primarily is gold with it's got like a little hint of red in it. But then Mary Jacobe is here on the other side, and her robe is primarily red with blue on the outside of it. This beautiful blue, not quite the blue of the boat, but this beautiful sky blue color. And their hand positions are very different. If you're watching this video cast, you can see close-ups behind me of Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe. And I'll get to that in a moment, but I'll describe the hand positions. For Mary Salome, she has her right hand out as if in a blessing. And in her left hand, she holds this beautiful golden orb-looking thing that's actually a jar. It's a container. And I'll get to that in a minute. And then Mary Jacobe, she has her hands in that classic prayer pose before her heart space, really. And her mudra, you might say, her hand motions are those of being in prayer. And now, both of these women have had added to their statues a big, long rosary that has a cross at the end of it, but those are not unique. And even St. Mary Salome has a couple of beads that are added to her wrist with which she is doing blessings. So there's some beads that I'm sure for folks who slipped them on there are ways to show her great reverence and great appreciation. And I do want to say a word about my experience this go round with these statues of Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe. And it really comes out of, first of all, I admit that I do not speak French, and so I did my best to communicate in Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer, and I really wanted to know, like, what are the people saying? Like, there's like people making their trade all around this amazing, like, church building that we believe was built at least in the 13th century, but certainly has a feel of being like the fortification of the city from a much earlier time than the 13th century. So most likely had been there prior. There's claims that it had been like created, this church, on the very site where in previous eons before the arrival of the companions, it had been a place of worship to the goddess Venus. There's even some tracings that this might have been a place of worship to the triple goddess of the Celts. And so there's this ancient like power that is there, this energy I felt in the crypt and in this place. And there's a way that like you step out of the streets all around this like old part of the city and into like, it just feels like you're being catapulted into this glorious, like almost like a catacomb feeling where you have this sense of like the sanctuary is ancient feeling, and it it's not incredibly ornate like many of like the cathedrals or basilicas of Europe would be, but it has this power to it, these solid walls, and of course the high vaulted ceiling. And it's a sanctuary that's a bit darker than many of the other places. So there's a way in which it really does have this sense of being fortified, or almost like being in a place of great safety. And then far ahead of us, over the chancel area, is the place where there's this like opening in like the wall up top, and this like big wooden looking box is hanging out over the chancel area just a little bit. And those are actually that's actually the place of the remains that have been found of the Marys, Mary Jacobe and Mary Salome. And the church annually brings those down for a great festival of honoring Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe. And the thing of it is most people like don't even know who Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe are. People who are incredibly devout Christians miss the names of these women. And if you're a follower of Pause for Peace, you've heard me talk of them before, but it really struck me as I was there. I wanted to know what was their ministry. So I was doing my best to communicate. I went to the little like information center that's across the way from the church, and I did my best to communicate there, asking like what was their ministry. The best I was kind of reminded of was that, well, these Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe, they were present for the crucifixion, is what I was told. I asked a couple of other folks who have particular little shops where they're like claiming to be religious icons and iconography, that they're selling their religious artifacts, especially artifacts honoring Saint Sarah. And so I'm like, oh, okay, these folks would know, they're making their trade there. It was not easy to communicate there either, but like nobody really had a good answer for me. So I honestly was getting a little frustrated, because I thought, here you are like making money off of this honoring of Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe, and like, where are the stories of what they did here? Like, yeah, it was 2,000 years ago, but at the same time, like, where is the story of what they did? More than just honoring the legend that like they were here, what exactly was their ministry? How did they make an impact on the world around them when they landed on the shore and stayed? Like Lazarus and the others, Maximum believed to be, with the companions, Mary the Magdalene, they went on to other places in France, and they had their ministry in other places in France. But Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe stayed. And if Saint Sarah actually is the Egyptian woman, the gypsy woman who actually welcomed the companions onto the shores of France, that's amazing, and she has a presence there as well. There are traditions that say that she actually was a servant girl of Mary Salome, Mary Jacobe, and so she stayed there with Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe. I tend to think she probably had predated them and was the woman of like abundant hospitality, welcoming them in. And so there's still that sense of like welcome and hospitality. So what happened for me on that second day of being there is I was getting frustrated that I, number one, wasn't really able to communicate very well, and surely was just not finding the right people to ask. What was the ministry of Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe? And so there's an amazing way for €4 you can actually go all the way up like this bell tower place of the sanctuary and find yourself on the roof of this glorious, massive, fortified sanctuary where you can look out over the Mediterranean and see like all of the houses surrounding. It's not an incredibly large area. There's known to be only like 2,300 residents who live there, but this is a place of like kind of refuge still today. It's a place that a lot of people love to go and kind of get out of the city and be able to hang on the Mediterranean, this glorious area, ride some horses, enjoy the flamingos and the flair of all of that culture there. So I'm looking out over this area and kind of really like continuing to gnaw upon this. What is their ministry? Like, why does nobody know their story? This is what I want to know. Like, who were these women? And so, yes, from the canonical scriptures, we do see that Mary Salome is named as being at the crucifixion and the resurrection morning. We do see that a woman named Mary Jacobe, her name changes a little bit throughout the story, but we see that in the canonical scriptures that she too is a part of this being at this crucifixion, more so at the resurrection she's named. And we have this sense of these women had a particular role in the life of Jesus, in the life of the early followers, even though we don't know what it is today. So I'm gnawing upon all of this, sitting up there on the roof, and I go into a time of prayerful reflection. And it hits me that my healing touch teacher always said, just ask. Like, if you want to know a question, just ask and move yourself into silence and listen for what arises. And so I did, and what arose about their ministry really was the hand positions, the ways that these women have been honored in their statues there in Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer. And what I then went down from the roof to look at and like stand before this beautiful representations of them. And I really took in that Mary Salome is holding forth her hand as if in blessing. She is holding the jar, the alabaster jar, sometimes it's called, but it's obviously a jar in gold. And what we know from the scriptures is that this jar represents the jar with which Jesus was anointed, the jar that is containing the essential oils, what my pilgrimage leader talked about as the 7 sacred oils, as a blend that would be used by the Myra, these women who were trained in this role of being these ones who would anoint and bless and even journey with those who were in the process of dying. And these Myra have this ancient place in the story, even if we have kind of missed that part. We today, especially in the Western world, kind of miss what their role is, whatever a Myra is, unless we actually live in somewhere like southern France or have that intrigue and dive deep into these stories of these women. And so there's a way that Mary Salome is showing all the world that her role is as the one who anoints and is as one who blesses. And then as I stood before Mary Jacobe and took in her features and the differences between her and Mary Salome, I began to really notice she's not holding a jar. She's not offering out the blessing. She is in prayer. Now, I think it's powerful to have these two together in the boat so that we see the way that prayer and blessing and anointing all go together. But to take in the way that Mary Jacobe has been portrayed through the eons as the one holding the space of prayer, and in that way, blessing, being an anointing to the world. And I bring these stories to you and this experience I had because I want us in a time of quiet to listen for our own ministry. Every one of us who is somewhere on this path, even if we're only curious about Jesus, or if we have long been followers of his way, every one of us is called to our own ministry, which means that you don't have to be like an ordained pastor in a church like I am. You don't have to be in a role like that. all you have to do is have clarity about why you are here. What is your ministry? What is your way to serve the world? What is your way to bless the world? What is the prayer pose that you might hold in like honor and in the needs of the world? So in a time of quiet, I want us to reflect today. I'm going to invite us all to listen for our own ministry. So if you'll get yourself comfortable, it helps to have your feet flat on the earth when we move into this time of quiet reflection, this time of meditation. And I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath, deep down from the belly, before you release it slowly. Take another deep breath to really settle in, being grounded here in this place and time. And as you're releasing the breath this time, I invite you to open the space of your heart and maybe see your conscious ego, maybe see yourself, your conscious ego connecting down deep through the space of your heart, so that you might come face to face to the holy that resides in you at all times. Whether you might refer to that as your soul, you might refer to that as the Holy Spirit, you might refer to that as the spark of the divine. But if you can see yourself, your conscious ego, coming into connection with that divine part that lives in you, that aspect of God that is in you at all times, even when you're not aware of it. This is the time in the quiet where we let the ego, the conscious ego, all of that settle, so that we can pose a question to the God that lives within, to the Spirit that is so incredibly wise and is so accessible to us, if only we would turn inward and seek to connect. And when you're ready, I invite you to ask yourself, but the soul part of yourself, the spirit part of God that lives within you. I would invite you to ask, what is my ministry? Like, what really is the reason I am here? In the quiet, pay attention, notice what is revealed. Might be through a sensation, might be something you hear, it might be something you see in your mind's eye. Maybe it is like a feeling, an inner sensation that arises. In the stillness, seek to ask, what is my ministry? What's the work? Like the work of God that I am here to be about. Don't listen in your head. Listen here in your heart. I invite us to take another deep breath and slowly to release. You might imagine your breath receding like the waves on the shores of the Mediterranean right there in Saintes-Maries-de-la-Mer. This beautiful sea water cools and refreshes. Before we depart this time of stillness, if you would offer inwardly some form of gratitude, some form of thankful expression for what has been revealed in this time. And when we're ready, let's us return our hands to that same prayer pose of Mary Jacobe, with our palms together, right there, like at the level of our chest. Might be a little bit closer to your face or your throat chakra, which is all good. And then if you'll tap the heels and toes of your feet into the earth. You can even do that opposite, so like there's bilateral stimulation that takes place. Very helpful thing for the brain, for the energy. And then when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes if they've been closed and return to this present moment. Make sure you take some kind of note to let this that has come imprint in you, because you might have just seen yourself in a vision, seen yourself being in a certain way in the world. Your ministry may not to be doing something different. Your ministry might just be to be doing what you do every day in your vocation or your job, but to be doing that in a way that is authentic to yourself. It might be to be doing that more creatively, or to be doing that more spontaneously, or to be about your daily work with a little bit more trust and relaxation that God's got your back. It's all well. And you might have even noticed in your silence that it was really hard to get out of your head. Sometimes that happens for us. We get still, and then the brain just goes crazy with grasping onto things. And part of what we do every time we return to meditate, we're learning more and more to let go of that and to move more into the space of our heart and to listen inwardly there, to let God reveal to us what we need to know. This is like a practice to learn how to recognize these nudgings and these revelations that come from God to us, that we can then bring to one another and continue to decipher if we're not really sure what they mean all the time, or to continue to kind of reflect upon, why in the world did I just hear in this meditation, whatever it is you might have heard, caring. Maybe you heard something like that repeatedly, and you're I don't do anything all day long to be a caring person, but yet my ministry I'm being called to is to be about caring. So that's something to continue to reflect upon, to listen inwardly about, to continue to bring back to spirit again and again and say, what do you mean by this? Show me what this looks like. Show me how I incorporate this daily. Show me what this would feel like in my body if I was about this in the world each day. Every one of us has a ministry. And I hope that you can keep imprinted in your memory these beautiful images of Saint Mary Salome and Saint Mary Jacobe. And if nothing else, to continue to marinate in their stories that I've shared here today, that you can dive further in the Bible and read them, especially starting around those stories of the crucifixion of Jesus, the burial of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. That's where you're going to see these names showing up. And to continue to let their stories form them. You know, they are not people who have been lifted up in like a huge way in the world throughout the eons. They may be people who are like, I guess they would be called like supporting actresses if they were in a movie today, with Mary Magdalene being a main character and her being the lead actress and Jesus being the lead actor, and Mary Salome and Mary Jacobe being these supporting actress roles. And yet we have no idea exactly how important their contribution is. And that's the cool thing. We each have a contribution to make. And even if we don't think that we're like the main leading role, that we're the star of the show, there's something for us to do that really will make a difference in the lives of so many. Be it through prayer, like Mary Jacobe, or be it through blessing, like Mary Salome. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you next time when I will share a little bit more about the beautiful monastery of Saint Michel in Devar, the southeast part of France. Blessings.